And joining me now is Eric Mandel, Director of the Middle East Political Information Network. Eric, it's great to see you as always. We want to get to some questions in just a moment, but first we heard from Danny Danon just a moment ago. And Israel's ambassador to the United Nations came on Stateside just last night, actually, right after the vote was held and rejected, for that matter. And here's what he had to say to the countries that voted against the resolution.
Shame on them when they will have to deal with terrorism. And it will come to their territories. Then they will come to the UN and ask for support against terrorism. You cannot do that. If you want to fight terrorism, you have to condemn terrorism unequivocally.
All right, so why is this so difficult? Why is it so difficult for this body, the United Nations, to call a terrorist organization a terrorist organization?
So this
That's partially, I suppose, a rhetorical question.
This is about anti-Semitism.
Right.
It's a double standard against Israel. The UN, to anybody who's objective, would see that by the United States State Department definition and what used to be the European Committee on Xenophobia and Racism, that if you have a standard against a country that you don't have against every other country, and it happens to be Israel, that is the definition of anti-Semitism. The UN speaks volumes about it, just the history. There's been over 500 resolutions against Israel in its lifetime, 20 per year, 6 last week, 0 against Hamas, and 25% of all human rights resolutions against Israel. Now, I didn't say Israel is perfect, but it is so disproportionate. So I think Nikki Haley said it best. She said basically this was going to be a litmus test for anti-Semitism. She says, she goes, it's almost the very definition of anti-Semitism. If you can condemn terrorism against Israel, targeting its civilians with rockets, missiles, and incendiary balloons that are there, that if you can't vote for this, but you would vote for it against every other country if terrorism was committed that way, certainly in this country if it was coming from Mexico or Canada, that is anti-Semitism. And I think this was, as she's departing as the UN ambassador, I think it was one of the highlights of her career.
Even though the vote to condemn Hamas, again, failed, was there a bright side? It seemed as though Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was trying to find some good in this, and that Israel got more support than it had ever gotten before.
I think there's truth to that. This is, half filled, half empty glass. Yeah. And I think it is more half-filled than half-empty because it actually was a majority. It was only a Bolivian and Kuwaiti maneuver that made it that you needed to have 2/3 vote. Granted, a General Assembly vote is not a UN Security Council vote, but it was symbolic. And there were many nations that either voted or abstained that normally would reflexively go against Israel. For example, India. And so Chad, where the president had just been in Israel, abstained. So, and that's a Muslim majority country. So the fact that a plurality, but the majority of the yeas versus nays, was condemning Hamas, I think is moving in the right direction, because I think what they're actually saying now is what has been said a long time. The world really doesn't care that much about the Palestinians because the Palestinians haven't really wanted to help themselves. They really want to, the leaderships of those organizations want to help themselves and not their people. And so they really don't want to be vested there. They'll give them the rhetorical help.
What does this do for Hamas, though? Because you still have the issue of reconciliation that needs to take place between the Palestinian factions.
I had this discussion with Michelle. Do we really believe that reconciliation is the answer going forward? Maybe this is a 3-state solution, that maybe the Palestinian Authority is capable, and then there should be something in Gaza, a different entity. Maybe they come together. Maybe the answer is going back to being aligned with Jordan. But the question here about making this happen is not for today, and it's unfortunately not going to be for the Trump deal.
Eric Mandel, it's great to see you as always. Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.